writer of The Endless Summer. Thank you, Adam, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Jude. And I will try to avoid Beatles references because I'm sure that you've done that your entire life. So,
well, luckily I like the Beatles, and it is a great song. You know, I think it would be horrible if I didn't like that song.
I think so. That would be like a curse. You know, you could have a name like me because my last name is Stump, and so like half of the people that I've met in my lifetime, when they find out that my last name is Stump, they always say, "Hey, Stumpy!" Like they're the very first person to ever think of that. And I wish that I could say that like that was only in childhood, but it's even adults who do that. It's
interesting.
So you have a good name. I have a short, squat name. So.
Are you tall?
No, I am painfully average. I am 5'11" and 3/4 inches.
Okay.
And so, like, just a shade under 6 foot. It's like so annoying because I really wish that I could say that I was 6 feet tall, but I am not.
Yeah.
And almost every man in my family is 6 feet or taller.
Okay.
Like my grandfather was 6'4", and my uncle is 6'4", and I just feel like a little ant next to them. It's very sad.
Well, I don't know. 6 feet tall is tall to me. So
That's it. I will say, you know, I spent some time in Europe, and even though I am only like 5'11", when I was in Europe, I was in the French countryside for a summer, and I was like the tallest person there, and they just couldn't get over how tall I was. I was, you know, like a giant, and I actually at the time I had a big red beard and long blonde hair, and they actually called me a Viking. Like,
I was gonna say,
you're not an American, you are a Viking. And I was like, oh, okay. So that was my nickname for the summer, was Viking.
Viking, nice.
Yeah.
So what are we drinking today?
We are drinking, well, I have mine here. You have your very lovely teapot, but it is paud'arco tea. I actually,
Paud'arco tea.
I have two kinds. I have a bagged tea, which is yellow.
Oh, you know what? We won't use that because it's a brand name.
Oh, okay. Well then, all right.
So,
you can edit that out.
Yeah, I can.
Here, this doesn't have a brand name on it. I won't show it. So, but this is actual ground up bark from the tree, like just pure bark. And so that's actually what I drink. And I wish I could show it to you, but I'm going to spill it. It's like brown. It's like ditch water is what it looks like. So, there you go. There you go.
Water. Yeah, very barky.
It is. It's got a really earthy flavor. I like it. But then again, I like weird things. So, but I did not start drinking it because I liked it. I have other tea here that I won't show you because it's got brand names on it. But mullein leaf tea, turmeric ginger tea.
Oh, yeah.
I like a lot of the herbal teas, and I started drinking those for health reasons, and that's why I drink this. I actually learned to like it. When I first tasted it, I was like, wow, this tastes like dirt in a cup. And now I'm used to it, and I enjoy it. So It's a nice warm beverage.
Yeah, so paud'arco tea. Yeah. So cheers.
Cheers. Tink.
Tink. Yeah, slurping because it's hot. But it is nice.
Have you seen the movie Clue?
Mm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I love it when they're eating the soup and slurping through the spoon. I love that. So.
That's great. Yeah, so there'll be a lot of slurping today.
A lot of slurping, yes.
All right, so Adam, we are both writers. You have been in the world a lot longer than I have. I'm just breaking out. And but you are also an editor, and you're actually putting an anthology together right now.
Yes, I'll tell you what, I've been writing now. I've been writing for a while. I probably started writing in 2016, but I didn't start publishing anything until 2018. Oh. And I mainly write short stories. After working with getting a lot of short stories published, I would submit to just like online journals and things like that, magazines and everything. I get stuff published. And then I began submitting to anthologies. And after I submitted to a few anthologies and was accepted, I thought, boy, maybe I could work on an anthology. And so the very first anthology that I worked on was actually in the Sci-Fi Roundtable, and the guy who was heading it up, who unfortunately has stopped writing, his name is Shane Thomas. He put together an anthology that was based on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yes, actually, I'm going to have you pause there. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I wanted to pull that book out, and you just reminded me. So.
Oh, okay. Very well. Sounds good.
I have to run upstairs, so I'll be right
Okay, well, I'm going to get my copy too.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe back up just a little bit. so go ahead and start about maybe the Shane Thomas thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the first anthology that I really worked on was a wonderful anthology, which was headed up by Shane Thomas. And unfortunately, he is no longer writing. He's pursuing some other things. But he got this together and asked if I would help him edit. And Stephanie Barr also helped edit. And so she and I took like half the stories and edited them. And then Shane did sort of the final edit and put it all together and formatted it. And so this is the book right here, and it actually has the full novella from Robert Louis Stevenson, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and then it has a bunch of other retellings, and my friend, fellow author N.D. Coley, actually has like a sequel to it. He wrote an epistolary tale, which is basically it's a story through letters, like written letters, and it's a sequel.
Much like the original was written, right?
Much like the original, exactly. He took that and he ran with it, and so it actually takes place after The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And it was just wonderful, and so I learned an awful lot about editing there. And and I don't have a copy.
If I may, I want to do a shout out too to Joel E. Russa, who's a great friend of mine. And I believe he had something to do with.
He does, yeah. He's in here as well. Yes,
he's got a story in it, and we actually there's quite a few people in the writers group that we are both in together that I have, JMH Writers and Illustrators on Facebook.
Yes.
And so lots of familiar names, and I'm just gonna shout out these names just because I love you guys so much. We've got DM Rasch, R-A-S-C-H. Want to make sure I'm spelling that correctly. Joel E. Russa, a Stump. A lot of them in our group. Bill McCormick did one. He's a great guy. He was actually my guest a few times ago.
Yep.
Stephanie Barr, Shane Thomas. Yeah, lots of great people in this book. So, and I've read all of them except the original, but I think I read the original. That's where my bookmark is. I read the original long ago, so I'm like, I've got other things to read. I'll have to get back to that. So.
That's it. Enough people have read Robert Louis Stevenson, so
No, I recommend reading the original. I have read it.
Take a back burner to the indie authors. He's dead. You won't hurt his feelings. So.
But I know I've read it probably several times, so I know the story quite well. So
yes.
I was like, I'll get to it. I just wanted to read all my friends' stories, and really fun.
I will say it's interesting because a lot of people misunderstand the original novella of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and they think Jekyll is a good guy and Hyde is a bad guy, and that's not really the case. They're both bad.
Right.
Because Jekyll wants to be bad, but since society prevents that, he creates Hyde, for that. So a lot of people don't understand that, and I think that's a really important thing. And like the story that I wrote that's in this book, I really lean on that. And Hyde might be the manifestation of the evil, but Jekyll is really the driving force, and so
which makes him actually more evil.
Exactly, doesn't it? I mean, it's like, man, yeah, he's like a snake.
The face he's showing to society is the upstanding, doctor,
right?
And secretly, well, this I don't know. This goes on a lot in real life too, right?
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. And it's, fact is stranger than fiction, I think. And I think a lot of people, I hate to say it because it sounds very pessimistic, but I think it's more realistic. I think a lot of people are good mainly because society won't allow them to be bad.
Yes, yeah.
I'm not going to say the majority of people. I think that's not quite true. I think the majority of people are probably relatively neutral, morally speaking. But I think there's a pretty good percentage of people who would probably commit crimes if there were no punishment for them.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's sad, but it's good story fuel, I suppose.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
there's, I think it was, I could be wrong, but Stephen Colbert maybe. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It was, I can't think of his name. Bill Maher?
Bill Maher, yeah.
I think it was him. He calls himself the pessimistic optimist. So,
there you go.
There you go.
There you go.
Good,
like
bad, pessimism, optimism. We're kind of, I think a lot of us dwell in the middle somewhere.
In the gray, yeah. And I think, that's actually my book, The Endless Summer.
Yes. Very good. You have a real copy.
It's filled with a lot of it's filled with a lot of gray, and actually the cover is sepia. It's sort of grayscale. For a summertime book, there's no color except for the blood red title. But I think probably most of my writing is pretty gray because I think life is gray. Bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. Children get sick and die. Grandmas get sick and die. And so writing should be an escape. But unless you're writing just pure fantasy, happy tales typically are not realistic tales,
Right.
So that sort of populated a lot of my writing, and I gravitate towards that. I will say this though, about writing, it's interesting because once COVID hit and the pandemic really hit and the lockdown happened and everybody was like getting really depressed and mental health was increasing and suicides were increasing, I stopped writing a lot of dark stuff and I actually started writing happier stuff. So for me as an author, I guess the pandemic was probably an upper.
Well,
bizarre. But
when I that year, I always have to add a year when I'm thinking back. Like if I say 2 years, it's actually 3 years because like the COVID year is like I think it's non-existent in my brain or something. But
I hear you. As a matter of fact, this painting behind me, this was created on cardboard by my children during pandemic when their school closed down and we had them home. We were like, oh boy, we got to do something with these kids, and so we started doing an awful lot more art.
Yeah.
And so now we have like boxes and boxes of COVID books. I always say, and I will get back to editing, by the way. I always say, whenever you come home from the hospital after your child has been born, they should. They give you like a bag of diapers and like a blanket to wrap the kid up in and everything. I think that they should also include a paper shredder with the birth of every child. Because you got to do something because you can't keep all of their art.
Right,
and, some of it is just scribbles and you think, oh boy, and I was like, that should just go in the box,
I have a drawer about this deep and wider than I can hold, the camera can just full, and it's hard to get rid of them though.
It is, and we have four boys, and so they produce voluminous amounts. And so basically what my wife and I devised last year when the pandemic started was we said we're going to keep a tote, like a big plastic tote, And all year long, their school stuff is just going to go in that tote. And at the end of the school year, during the summer, we're going to look through and decide what we really want to keep and what we don't. And what we do want to keep, we're going to put in a box that's like labeled and then just, set it somewhere. And if we ever want to go down memory lane, we can just grab a box and look through it. But
definitely.
You can't keep everything,
No, you can't.
If I could turn my computer around and show you my basement, it would appear that I'm trying to keep everything, but I'm really not. So I won't do that because my wife would kill me if I showed our hoarding off the whole world. So, yeah.
Well, our children are precious, and what they create is precious. I only have one, and they're 19 now, and they don't even remember doing, the art and stuff. So there's a moment in like childhood where it's like they're no longer that person. I mean, that person is definitely there.
Yeah.
But they, in their brain, they're no longer that person. And so I think there's a wonderfully bittersweet lesson in when a child grows up and they're like, just throw it away. Why are you keeping it, Mom? It's stupid. It's it wasn't like I was a great artist.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, but you were to me.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you what, it's interesting because I'm really strange, and I did not know that about children until I actually started having my own, because I don't have total recall. No. But I have a very vivid pictographic memory. And I can, if I sit and just think, I can count memories. And so, like in my childhood, I remember most of my childhood from a very, very early age. I even remember things that happened when I was a baby. Like when I was like a year old, I have memories of these places, and I'll describe something to my parents, and I'll say, I have this really foggy memory of this, and I'll describe something, and they say, wow, that was from a vacation we took when you were just a baby. You were like a year and a half old. And they're like, how do you remember that? I'm like, I don't know. And so, but when I started having kids, and I would say, hey, do you remember the first house we lived in? Or do you remember this? And they say, no, not really. I realized as they grow, they sort of lose those memories. And I was like, wow, And so now I can talk to my kids about their childhood. And it's really exciting because they're like, I don't remember doing that as a baby or something like that. And so we talk about it, and I show them, pictures and stuff like that. And I say, oh, this is when you did this or that or the other, And so it's really neat to see growth. And of course, our kids are 3, 5, 8, and 10, so they're really spaced out pretty evenly, and so you see them at all of these different stages of development. It's neat to watch human beings grow and change and transmogrify into something. Who knows what? So.
Yeah. All right. So.
If you want to go back to talking about editing.
Sure, we talked about our children.
We talked about children and things like that, and that's wonderful. Children have fueled my writing, and as a matter of fact, a lot of the stories I write are about kids. This whole book is about a group of 10-year-old boys. I have another book on Amazon Kindle called The Wall, and it's about a 10-year-old girl. I don't know what it is about 10-year-olds, but
I don't know. I think there are certain ages that are major turning points in people's lives, and 10 seems to be like a pretty, 10
is like you're leaving childhood, but you're not quite in adolescence, and there's that weird liminal phase there. And I think
you're still at that age where you're not trying to be too serious. Right? You just want to play. You just want to experience. And you're kind of past that initial learning stage. I mean, you can speak, you can walk,
Hopefully.
Just like taking. I don't know. It's just a really wonderful age. I remember, just going to the playground every single day and just not able to get enough of swimming and running and.
Exactly. Yeah. You can really enjoy being off. Like for summer break from school and everything like that. Whereas when you're an adult, you're like, all I want to do is like sit on the couch and like binge watch Netflix. And as a kid, when they're out of school, they're like, let's go, let's do something, let's have an adventure. So yeah.
Hopefully that's still happening.
I think it's changing because unfortunately media and electronics, I think, have really snatched a lot of that away from our children these days. And that's sad.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough, I live on a street that still has families with kids, and all of us as parents are pretty committed to like getting the kids out there to play together, ride bikes, do that sort of stuff. But I think it takes a conscious effort because I think since adults tend to be, I hate to say lazy, maybe tired.
Tired. I was going to say, I think it's tired and
when adults. Yeah, they're just tired. So when they have time off, they're like, I just want to sit down. And I think our kids pick up on that. So as a parent, you have to make a conscious effort to say, no, I'm not going to be that parent that's just, sitting there, on my phone like this. The whole thing.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Yeah, and we need to produce more children like that. So,
so there we went back to, well, but we're talking about children for your book, the end.
Yeah,
and so
that was not my intention at all. None of that is true, but I didn't plan on saying any of that.
No, totally.
But I will say, in some ways, I'll transition this. How about this? Growing up from childhood into adulthood, a lot of writers are that same way. And, when I look back to the stuff that I wrote at first and the stuff that I write now, it's way different. And even as an editor, I'm getting back to editing. As an editor,
nice.
the stuff that I would accept previously versus the stuff that I accept now, that's a lot different. It's changed. And I will say too, I used to be like a grammar Nazi. So if I got, a submission that had typos in it, I would have just rejected it and said, this is garbage, learn how to write, before you... Nowadays... Nowadays, I'm more inclined to say, this is a good story, but it really suffers from poor grammar or typos or something like that. Why don't you get it to an editor, get it cleaned up, and then send it back, and I would accept it, or something like that. I tend to be a little bit more gracious now in my old age. So, I will say it also depends on what you're editing. We were amongst friends for the Jekyll and Hyde anthology, so you tend to be a lot friendlier, and maybe you let some things slide that you wouldn't normally, because it's a lot easier to say to a perfect stranger, this really stunk.
Yeah.
I'm not printing it. When it's a friend, or at least a Facebook friend that you're a little bit more cautious with acceptances and rejections,
These people were chosen specifically for this anthology, right? Or
some were. A call was put out.
Oh, there was. Okay.
There was a call put out, but we pretty much said we know these people, and we're probably going to accept most of what is sent to us. And we did actually ask some of these people, hey, we really like your writing, will you submit? Shane was, more in charge of that, recruiting, basically. And we knew that they were high caliber authors to begin with. So we knew it wasn't going to be crap, that we were reading. And I will say there were some who had a lot of typos that had to be fixed. And so we didn't kick them out, but we did say we need to fix a lot of this stuff. So, this actually was the first editing project. Was it the first editing? I think this was the first editing project that I was on. The second, maybe it was the first and this was the second. I can't remember the timeline, but there's a magazine out called Sci-Fi Lampoon, which was put together, which was a project put together by a man named G.D. Deckard, who was in the Sci-Fi Roundtable group. And I was actually the editor-in-chief for the very first issue of that. And I spent some time after that on the editorial board, if you want to call it. But a lot of things, including COVID, took me away from that project, and I'm working to get back in a little bit with that group. But it's a magazine based in speculative fiction. And so that was really interesting because you get a lot of different genres in there. Even though it's called Sci-Fi Lampoon, they do publish suspense, humor, and because of course Lampoon.
I was going to say Lampoon. That must be funny, right?
It is, yeah, and it's not just it's not just comedy. Although there are some really funny pieces. It's also satire. There's that satire element in the Lampoon.
I write satire. Yeah.
Yeah, and but that was a fun project to work on. And I'll tell you what, getting that first issue off the ground, man. That was a lot of work. I don't think people realize how much work getting a new publication together actually is. But I worked on a couple other projects, and then I decided, I got sick back when COVID first came to the U.S. In early 2020, either April or May. I actually got ill, and as far as I know, I was the first person in Western Pennsylvania to develop COVID long haul syndrome.
I've not heard of this.
Yeah. So what's that?
I haven't heard of this.
But you haven't heard of it. Okay.
No.
So what they're finding is people who had COVID, especially people who had mild cases of COVID, began developing some very strange symptoms afterward. And these symptoms would last for weeks or even months. And I actually bounced back from the illness really quickly, only to develop these really strange symptoms. And I didn't really get well from them until October. So I had COVID in May, and then I developed all these symptoms and didn't get over it till October. Some of the symptoms that I still deal with actually are blood pressure and blood sugar issues. There are two of them, and I still have trouble regulating those. I have to really actively control those. But also brain fog, memory loss, extreme fatigue, tremors, and I still have tremors, which my hand's shaking a little bit, but usually in the mornings I wake up, and it's almost like I have Parkinson's when I wake up in the morning. It's really bad. And so that really incapacitated me. Because of my brain fog, there were months that went by where I couldn't read anything, let alone write, because I just couldn't focus and concentrate on it. I'd read the same paragraph 20 times and just chuck the book down because I couldn't retain it, which, of course, for a person like me, I had a really good memory. Like, it was traumatic because I stopped remembering. And there are whole periods during that time that I still have no memory of, and so that's really hard to deal with. So I stopped doing everything, stopped writing, stopped reading, stopped editing, and sort of just worked on getting healthy again. Yeah. As soon as I got rid of the long hauler syndrome, I actually developed another really strange illness called autobrewery syndrome, which is an overgrowth of yeast and bacteria in your guts.
Right.
And it causes fermentation. And that's actually why I drink this tea now, because it's antibacterial. And so I do that on top of all of my other medications and supplements to kill off the yeast and the bad bacteria. And what happens is your gut ferments, which means that it creates its own alcohol.
So you're going to get drunk off of eating a cookie.
Exactly. And so now, I mean, we had no idea why. My wife was like, she was like, your breath smells like alcohol. Have you been drinking? And I was like, no, I haven't had anything to drink. And so I would start slurring my speech. I wound up going to the ER several times with an ethanol level, like around 300, which is blackout and coma levels for alcohol. And so we realized something weird was going on. And finally found a doctor in Texas. I'm in northwestern Pennsylvania, and I'm being treated by a doctor in Texas. So, thank God for the internet, Zoom and phone calls and everything, because I don't actually have to go to Texas. I can, talk to him on the phone, and he can order tests and things like that. But it's been a long, strange journey, and health is very important. And I never realized that until I became unhealthy. When I developed a chronic illness, and even now I'm not fully free, I don't think, of either of those things, either long haul syndrome or the auto brewery syndrome. So I've really been living a very restrictive lifestyle. But that's been really tough. But I will say I'm getting better, and so I am writing again, I am reading again, and I am editing again.
Yeah.
And so I have a current project, which is a youth/young adult anthology, sci-fi themed, and it's called Galactic Dreams. And so the submissions are closed for it right now, but I'm beginning to read them. And so one thing that I will say about submitting.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Do your homework.
Yeah, read the submission guidelines, people. I'm talking to you, the people who are out there watching this. Read the guidelines and follow them.
Everybody has different guidelines. If you're one of those writers, like I have, every time I come across a new magazine or anthology or something, I star it. I have lists of publications, and next to them, because it was getting so difficult to sit there, and it was taking so much time to read the submissions, and then I'd read them, and then I'd come back to that publisher, and of course I'd forget, so I'd have to read the submissions again for the next story. I finally just, in the little file, I have the word count, like next to the name of the magazine. I got totally organized because it was taking 10 minutes every time to read the submissions. And, everybody wants a different word count. Everybody wants it formatted a different way, Yeah. I've even, some of them have gotten tricky, too, because they want to be sure people are reading them. So they'll say, do not use such and such a font, or do use this font, like a specific font that they want, just to know that you're reading their submission guidelines. So very important. Yes.
And, and I think, what you're doing with keeping sort of a file on it, that makes a lot of sense, especially if you plan on submitting to a lot of different places. Reading and remembering, or at least knowing where to get the information for the guidelines, is your friend. Keep it organized, because I will say, I think a lot of writers tend to be pretty sloppy with their submitting, and even if they're a good writer, there's no excuse for not following the rules. I think the rules are there for a reason, and what I found is I had pretty clear-cut submission guidelines for my current project that I'm working on, because I found out what works for me with publishing, how to format, how to do things. I found out what works for me the best, and that's why I have those guidelines. And so, I'm not getting paid for this unless the book sells. So it's like I'm doing all of this work, front work. I'm doing it all for free, and so if they don't follow the guidelines, it makes more work for me.
Absolutely.
The format, and so you're not doing the editor any favors, and by doing your own thing. And so I learned that the hard way, because I did with one of my projects, I did accept just anything formatted anyway, and when I went to put it all in a program, I had like a boatload of extra work to do, and I'm like, this is stupid. So, so if you're submitting, follow the guidelines. That's the number one recommendation that I have as an editor. Yeah. The number two recommendation is read the publication you're submitting to.
Oh yeah.
To which you are submitting would be proper. Read the publication to which you are submitting. I think a lot of people just say, "Hey, I've got this great story, and everybody's going to want to publish it," and then they just shotgun it out. And if you're submitting something to a publication that doesn't publish what you're submitting, of course they're going to reject it.
Absolutely.
So
I would
know the publication ahead of time, and I always lead off with, in my cover letter, if they want a cover letter, I always say something like, I have read several issues of your magazine and I love it. I greatly appreciate what you publish. And so I've written a story that I think would be a good fit for your magazine. And that's how I start off the cover letter. It's gotten me a lot more acceptances, not the cover letter, but just reading the publications. And I would say, probably I have a 30 to 40% acceptance rate for submissions.
That's high.
Yes, it's pretty high, but that's because I don't shotgun submit. I read carefully, and then I carefully select a work that would fit the publication, and that's really paid off in the long run. And I don't write stories for publications. Like I don't say, I want to get a story published in such and such magazine, so I'm going to write a story that they'll publish. I write whatever's in my brain, and then I just keep it filed away in my computer, and then when I'm reading a magazine, I'm like, boy, I bet you they'd like this story, and then I ship it off to them.
Yeah, find the publication that fits your work rather than fit your work around certain publications. I think you probably get a lot more written, and it's going to be more true coming from that place instead of, I think there was one time I wrote a story specifically for a call because, some of them are specific.
Sure, yeah.
But for the most part, it's like you got to write what's in your heart and in your brain. And I agree. That's the good part about being an author is you can write what's inside you, either your heart or your head. And it's cathartic and it's honest. I think writing to market, it's not dishonest, but I think it sort of cheapens the craft. And I won't mention any names, but there is one author who's published a lot. And that's what he does. He literally writes to market. And if that's all your goal is just to get a lot of stuff published, that's fine. But I think for me, where I'm at, I originally I wanted to get a lot of stuff published. I was like, I want to publish. Oh yeah, that's every writer. Yeah,
that's everybody's goal. Right? At least in the beginning,
right? I have 500 short stories and 10 novels.
Right.
Great.
and I realized. Excuse me, just a second. No, you can't come down, honey. I'm sorry. That's my 3-year-old. Dad, can I come down? So, but you can sit down here. Do you mind if my son sits down?
I don't mind. Yeah, that's great.
So I'll wait till he gets here.
Children are home, so...
Oh, yes, my children are home, and so I am a cellar dweller right now, so I've retreated to my basement. So instead of just having an ugly cinder block wall, I hung up some of their work, so...
Very nice.
So now I have painted cardboard.
I was going to say, I really like the painting behind you, it just seems like an abstract, with the way art is.
Well, when your kid is like 3, everything looks like something... abstract. I don't know.
Yeah, great.
Yes, I love it. So
I made a sun for the endless summer. Going through my house, I'm like, I gotta have props. So I was like, plants, sun, I'm like skulls and crossbones. And things like that just don't cut it for this.
Yeah.
Or a sundress.
I see that. I see that.
Colors.
I have a sunny shirt. I'm wearing my chickens make me happy shirt. So it's a very colorful rooster.
Great. That's wonderful.
I don't actually have my teapot, but I do have my tea in my Donald Duck mug because he is the greatest of all of Walt Disney's creations, in my opinion. So. Nice.
We might get sued by Disney. No.
That's right. I'll just cover it up whenever I take it.
No, I'm sure it'll be fine. YouTube will let me know when I'm downloading it if there's. We're stepping on anybody's toes, so we've already started, but. I might use some of this. Who knows?
That's fine.
Okay.
Witty banter, right? Witty banter. That's always good.
Are you tall?
No, I am painfully average. I am 5'11" and 3/4 inches.
Okay.
And so, like, just a shade under 6 foot. It's like so annoying because I really wish that I could say that I was 6 feet tall, but I am not.
Yeah.
And almost every man in my family is 6 feet or taller.
Okay.
Like my grandfather was 6'4", and my uncle is 6'4", and I just feel like a little ant next to them. It's very sad.
Well, I don't know. 6 feet tall is tall to me. So
That's it. I will say, I spent some time in Europe, and even though I am only like 5'11", when I was in Europe, I was in the French countryside for a summer, and I was like the tallest person there, and they just couldn't get over how tall I was. I was, like a giant, and I actually at the time I had a big red beard and long blonde hair, and they actually called me a Viking. Like,
I was going to say,
you're not an American, you are a Viking. And I was like, oh, okay. So that was my nickname for the summer, was Viking.
Viking, nice.
You can edit that out.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, slurping because it's hot. But it is.
Have you seen the movie Clue?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I love it when they're eating the soup and slurping through the spoon. I love that. So.
That's great. Yeah. So there'll be a lot of slurping today.
A lot of slurping. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So. Maybe back up just a little bit. Hey, I want to do a shout out too to Joel E. Rusa, who's a great friend of mine. And I believe he had something to do with.
He does. Yeah. He's in here as well. Yes.
He's got a story in it, and we actually there's quite a few people in the writers group that we are both in together that I have, JMH Writers and Illustrators on Facebook.
Yes.
And so lots of familiar names, and I'm just going to, shout out these names just because I love you guys so much. We've got DM Rasch, R-A-S-C-H, want to make sure I'm spelling that correctly, Joel E. Rusa, a Stump. Yeah, a lot of them in our group. Bill McCormick did one. He's a great guy. Stephanie Barr, Shane Thomas. Yeah, lots of great people in this book. So
it's me. I'll tell my wife, I'm like, I have to write today.
Yeah.
I'll just sit down, and in 2 hours I'll have 5,000 words on my laptop. And that's just
You're a fast writer.
I'm a faster writer than I am a reader.
Yeah, I was gonna say 5,000 words in 2 hours.
Yeah.
I'm about 1,000 words an hour person.
I type really, really, really fast. I don't know how many words per minute, but it's definitely more than I read.
I can type fast, but I think it's like the transmission. It's like how do I do that? Like it takes a while sometimes to get, but that's all right. We're all a little different.
I always think it's neat to learn how other writers write.